Yep.
We love shooting, hunting, and educating. So if you want to learn about long-range shooting, you're in the right place. This is the Long Range Addicts Podcast. You're ready? Stand by.
I got to fill around and turn everything off so it doesn't sit here and ding the whole freaking time. I don't know where my tires my other phone. Anyway, welcome to tonight's episode. I've been asked a lot lately on, like budget build type stuff because everybody doesn't have money to go out and buy a $5,000 or $10,000 setup. So I wanted to have this today about maybe some ideas that you could use to put together a build to go and hunt or compete, or maybe just even build a gun that'll do all of the above. I want to welcome Jose and Justin. Thanks for coming on today, guys. I know it's short notice as usual. I'm the most scheduled person around, but we're here. Appreciate you guys. How you guys been since the last episode?
Good.
Busy.
That's how everybody's been this summer, right? Everybody's like 2020's made it so it's just been nuts. I mean, everything's been going crazy, and like us, we can't get rid of kids. Finally, they're going back to school tomorrow. Thank the good guy upstairs. I think my wife's gonna have a meltdown, but I'm not. I'm gonna be, happy as hell. But anyway, let's get started thanking our sponsors. Benchmark Barrels, always appreciate them. They, I know, are coming out with some new stuff. I just got off the phone with them a couple days ago, and I'm excited to see, the kind of the direction that they're going. It's going to be kind of cool. And they're going to kind of change the way people look at some of the barrels and the way they're done. So I'm excited about how that's going to go down. Anyway, we wanted to do tonight, I text these guys earlier and I'm like, hey, let's sit down and let's write a list of what you would choose if you were going to build a budget rifle. What would you build? What would be your action? What would be your barrel? Blah, blah, blah. We went through the long range tactic guys. They all gave us some input on what they thought that they would build. So I wanted to kind of go through that with these guys. And hopefully maybe you find out about a product that you didn't know of before, or, maybe it gives you more light into a certain product, or, might help you with your build process. But so the first thing that I wanted to go over was stocks. Now, are there one of the stocks that either one of you guys kind of want to talk about as we get going? You've got the list in front of you, I'm sure, but what stock would you guys kind of feel comfortable going over, telling everybody about, Justin?
Well, for me, it kind of depends on what you're going to do with it, right? So if you're building the gun for hunting versus competition, you've got a little bit different options, I feel. But the one that I think all of us mentioned first when you kind of send it out to the group is that KRG Bravo. Because for, what are they, $300, $350, something around there, you just get tons of adjustability. It's already set up to run magazines. It's not terribly heavy. It looks
Yeah, it's sub 3
relatively
pounds.
good. Yeah, I
Sub 3
mean,
pounds. Yeah.
it's awful tough to beat that for the price. Now, if you're, I'll kind of take more of the hunting side and let Jose take more of the comp side, but there's also some really good options out there. Like Macmillan's got their MC Cubed line. Those are pretty nice. They're a little tiny bit heavier, but they're not bad, and they feel great. They feel, at least when I handle them, they feel a lot like their other higher end stocks. Then you also have some Bell and Carlson and HS Precision options that are $300 to $400. And most of my first, upgraded rifles had Bell and Carlsons and HS Precisions on them, and I loved them. They were great stocks. They were more that like a sport or varmint style, and they were great. So you have a lot of different options there, but I think KRG Bravo was far and away the most popular when we asked about it, just because I don't know how you beat it for $350.
Yeah, I've got one back here too. I kind of set them up so people could maybe look at it. Maybe I need to bring it up so people look at it. But you can always go on KRG website and look at it. But go ahead, Jose.
Well, I was just gonna say, I mean, yeah, they're not terribly heavy. I actually hunted with one 2 years ago in a pinch on a week-long hunt. And I mean, between the detachable magazines, I know a lot of people love the blind mags or whatever you'd call them on a hunting gun, but I honestly love the magazine. I love the ability to just pop that out, put it in my backpack, and be ready to go. And I know it saves you 30 seconds when you get back to the truck, but I just love the convenience. And then they were actually incredibly stiff. So I own a couple of KRGs of their various offerings, and to me, the Bravo's my favorite, regardless of money. To be honest, they're super stiff. They're super easy, like to modify. The kind of the system they use for how they hold the bottom of the stock on makes it really easy to add your own rails. I added like a $12 Arca rail full length off of Amazon, and it ran like a champ. So those are pretty good, especially for the competition. I mean, it all depends, right? Like the line I usually draw is like $500, and for under $500, I really find it hard to imagine. Not that there aren't other good options under $500. It's just, to me, the Bravo's the best option under $500.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing, is some of the other stocks that we're going to talk about, they all require bottom metals. Now you go into like, depending on what bottom metal you're going to buy, that adds another, what, $200, $300, depending on what bottom metal you go with. So to start off, I think our top choice is going to be the KRG Bravo. Now moving along, we've got a couple others, like they stated, the Macmillan MC3. They start a little bit cheaper. And Macmillan does have it's more of like a polymer bottom metal. And they're really, really nice, setups for the price that you can buy. You can either buy a DBM or BDL series. Graybow has a couple, HS Precision has a couple, and Bell and Carlson. Those were our top stock, choices. Now, the Macmillan MC3, they've got two different choices. They've got their Traditions, and then they've got their Legend. The Traditions is more of their hunting side. The Legends are tactical, adjustable cheek, more of a heavier profile. Have you played with those, Jose?
Just at SHOT Show. I keep meaning to try to get one in hand, but I can only have so much gear here at a time. But I mean, they're nice and stiff. I love they don't feel like, I guess when I saw the price come out, I was a little bit worried they might feel like a toy. I was like, there's no way you make a good rigid stock for that price. It also doesn't feel like a brick, and they felt pretty good to me. I mean, obviously I haven't pulled the trigger on one, but I was pretty impressed for when I handled them.
Yeah, and for you guys listening on the podcast, sorry you can't see what I'm doing. I'm just holding up one of their, it's one of their Legends in Veil Camo. So it kind of mimics their A5 style with more of the vertical grip. It's got a good cheek weld. And then you get into their adjustable Legend, where it's got a cheek piece and adjustable spacers and everything. But this is kind of their base. This one's a BDL style, I believe. And so you can get them different, but for the price, they're awesome stocks. A lot of people have been, really interested in them. And they've been great stocks. The Graybows, I've got one back here behind me on the Cowboys that we're doing a review on. They're great filling stocks as well. That's Ryan McMillan's company, and they feel great. They've got a few different versions like the MC3, whether it's tactical or hunting. Those ones would be a great one to look into as well. Justin or Jose, have you guys played with the Graybows at all?
I haven't.
Sadly, no. Only so much time. But that Renegade really does strike me. I mean, obviously I have an affinity for the standard stocks, and that Graybow seems like a really good compromise. I mean, the Renegade seems like a really good, let's say, mix between the kind of the chassis and traditional stock style.
Budget means a lot of things to different people, but their new Phoenix for $600 at 2 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
It's cheap, right?
And
for
adjustable
2 pound,
at 2 pounds.
2 pound
the
adjustable
hardware
stock. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a pretty good achievement at that price point. 'Cause that's the thing, right? The cheaper you get, the lighter you get, generally the more expensive. So if you're trying to do a budget lightweight gun, your budget's got to go up a little bit generally. And
the word cheap is relative, right? I mean, 3 years ago when I was, actually I guess 4 years ago when I was getting into this, picking a stock or a chassis or anything was kind of tough. But I mean, I think the most expensive chassis on the market at the time was like $950 Now, I mean, what, your matrices are up there well north of 1,000, your foundations, any of your Manners or high-end Macmillans. So when you think about that Graybow, that Phoenix is what they call it, that's so light and fairly affordable. And then even, so this one right here, God, I can't point. So this one is the MPA ultralight. And that one's only $750, I think, just everyday retail price from MPA themselves for the basic short action non-folder, and that one's 2.4 pounds and hella rigid, and you don't need a bottom metal. So I mean, that's when you take into account a stock and then throw in a $200 bottom metal, 750 for the whole package here, and full length and cheek adjustable. That's still relative to a lot of stocks. That's a heck of an option.
Yeah, and that's like the XLR magnesium. I was looking today at those, and I played with those. Kyle showed me one the other day from XLR, and I mean, they're holy crap and light. And I think the price point on those is what, like $550 or something like that. And they're just crazy light for a build if you wanted to go ultra light, budget friendlier than your standard stuff. But that's just kind of how it is. HS Precision, Josh Clough and those guys over there make some phenomenal stocks. They've been doing it. They're one of the only companies that I know of, works with the FBI and has contracts and different things. They build phenomenal stocks. A lot of the stocks you see on the Remingtons are HS stocks. You just don't realize it. They've got some phenomenal different stocks. Theirs have usually been more heavy. At SHOT Show, I talked to Josh. They did just release that ultralight carbon fiber stock that I'm trying to get my hands on, and they're really, really light. Didn't you have a friend, Justin, that just got one of those, or somebody?
No, I don't think an ultralight HS.
I can't remember who it was, but yeah. So those were a big time ultralight. Those had an adjustable cheek piece and everything on them, and they were pretty dang light for the price. The Bell and Carlsons, hell, they've been around forever. As far as as far as people are concerned, they've been around forever. But which ones do you guys prefer? Do you have anything that you guys could point to anybody about the Bell and Carlsons?
I like I think it was a Varmint Tactical, but it's not quite as vertical grip. It's more like a hybrid sporter vertical grip type thing. And I've shot 2 or 3 of those on my Prairie Dog rifles, and they were great. They were plenty stiff. They were comfortable. They shot well without bedding. And same, the HS similar style was the exact same stock I ran. It was just easy. It just worked.
Mm-hmm. What I think those round out our stock choices. Now, if anybody else has anything that they want to add as far as the decent priced stock options, comment here or comment on the Long Range Tactics page. But we kind of want to go through these pretty quick because we've got a lot of stuff to go through. So the chassis end, when I looked at pricing, the 2 best prices that I found were the XLR Element. They start at about $400 and go up from there. They're not the lightest. They don't have the longest fore end, but for the price, if you want to get into a chassis, they're a good entry level chassis. And then the MDT LSS. I think I've actually got both of those behind me somewhere too. And those were some of the chassis I started, trying to shoot with, trying to understand the chassis stuff. And we've kind of upgraded. But now, Jose, have you ever messed with the XLR stuff?
Man, I've borrowed a gun for about 2 months. I had one on it, and that was it. I'm pretty sure that was the what did they have at first? The Evolution is the one that had the circular forearm, and then I forget what the new one's the Envy, so I forget what was in the Element. The Element's the one that everybody was really shooting when I got into it. I mean, they're great. The ability to use kind of any whatever buffer tube attachable buttstock you want, I feel like adds a lot of value to those for people wanting to kind of really get their own perfect fit. And honestly, at a great value. I mean, I think when I was getting into it, you could find a used good setup for like $400, and they're great. They just, I think, XLR kept up with what was happening in the industry as far as adding modification and arc and all that with their Envy and everything. But that Element's probably underappreciated, to be honest.
Right. Yeah. And that's what I'm going to build my little boy. I'm going to build him a 223 because the ability to adjust the back end in those and let them grow with them, is something that you don't have to switch anything out. You just adjust it out as they go. So that's kind of one of the points that I've kind of made to go with that chassis itself. The MDT-LSS is their a little bit less expensive line. What's the new MDT? What are they called? I can't remember.
ACC.
Oh yeah, the ACC. All right, so they've got a longer fore end. They've got a grip kind of like the one Jose's got behind him. Those are a little bit more money, but the LSS, and then their new one, is it the Oryx? I believe that's one of their new chassis, is the MDT Oryx. I've seen quite a few people using those. And then they just released the one that looks a lot like the J. Allen. It took a lot of the J. Allen features. I can't remember exactly what it was called either, but those are our two chassis to look at, the XLR Element and the MDT LSS. Maybe one of these days we'll do the ultimate high-end build, and we'll tell you exactly what we do for an ultimate high-end build. But for the chassis in a decent price range, those are the two that we'd go with. Now, here's another one that a lot of people ask a lot of questions about. By the time you take a Remington 700 Action, you true it, you blueprint it, you do all the work, you might as well have just gone and bought one of these Actions, honestly. And that's my opinion. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. Because you still don't have the extraction you want. You still don't have a lot of the features that you would want that you get in one of these Actions. The Defiance Tenacity, that one's one of the new ones. It's got the ability to thread on headspace. You can swap out the barrels. You can do prefits for the Tenacity, right? Tenacity and the Ruckus. Yeah.
And the Anti that's coming out, or I think they just started selling them, but they're actually right there at the same price. And they're also machined well enough to just do prefits, older prefits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've got a couple of them at Boring, I think.
The new Tenacity comes with an integral recoil lug, right?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, is pretty big, because then you don't got to mess around with a pinned lug or a non-pinned lug trying to get everything aligned. It's just done. So that's right. And that used to be a feature. You were $1,200 before you saw an integral lug, and now they're under $1,000.
Right. And I think one of the big things I talked to Tate Streeter about too was from Impact was the integral rails, the ability of the rails moving around. I can't remember if the Tenacity was integral or not. That's one thing I'm gonna have to look into, but that was one of the high-end Actions that isn't, so it feels high-end, but it's not going to break the bank, in my opinion. The next one would be the Bighorn Origin. The Bighorn Origin is a phenomenal Action. I know that's one that Jose's played with a lot. What are your thoughts on the Origin, Jose?
So I've actually got one arriving on Thursday for another friend. I've talked to a couple people who kind of wanted something nice out the gate with saving money, or this guy's just wanting to build a dream build. And honestly, that Origin just doesn't leave anything to be desired. I mean, from what I've played with them, I still have a TL2, shot a heck of a lot of TL3s, and I think that Origin feels better than the TL2. I mean, in its own, and you run it and you run a TL3 beside each other, and I just don't see a whole lot of difference in how they feel and how they run and how reliable they are. And you put into account that they have the floating bolt heads where you don't got to replace a whole bolt in order to change bolt faces, right? And all of a sudden, like I got buddies that are running a 6.5 PRC and a GT on the same one, and turn around and can go get another bolt head and run a 223 with a $60 bolt or barrel vise and those two bolt heads, and all of a sudden you've got 3 guns with 1 optic and 1 chassis. So
yeah. JJ Rock, I know, was coming out with something like that too, that was going to be in that really nice price ballpark. But I looked on their website today and I couldn't find it. But I think there's still some stuff in the works out there. Do you have a Bighorn, Justin?
I've got a TL2. That was my first custom Action, and I love it. And I liked it enough that I bought the Rim-X Action, and I would run an Origin as well.
And you've got the floating bolt heads on the TL2, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like that Savage style. So you just pull a pin and the bolt face comes off. You swap it again, So I just swapped mine over from a standard to a 223, and that's what I'm running now for my 223 is that bighorn. And that Origin, that's the cheapest of all of them. It's like
It's
they
850.
came out at like 750. I think they're 825 now when I looked this morning.
I
Are
just
they still
paid for one
750?
yesterday. It's
Okay.
850.
I thought it said 825 on their site, but um that is the best bargain custom action out there, in my opinion. No one else touches it on price. Now, there's better features if you spend a little bit more money on some of the other ones. Um, but for dollar, I don't think you beat that one.
And the fact of the matter is, so what was that? It would have been end of 17, like just right pre-shot show 2018. A bunch of people started announcing the sub $1,000 nice actions, and I think that changed the game on what people can get or willing to do. I mean, sub $1,000, and yeah, you've blown any Trude 700 out the window anymore. It's not worth it.
Right. The next one's Nucleus and the Defiance Anti. We kind of hit on the Anti a little bit, but the Nucleus, I mean, it's kind of one of those that it got very popular there for, a couple months, and all of a sudden it just disappeared. And I'm not 100% sure why, but, Ted and the amount of thought that he put into that action was just crazy. Another one that isn't on here, and I believe it's in that price range, somebody's gonna have to correct me if I'm wrong. It's the they're out of Texas.
Alamo
Precision. What do those actions run? Do you guys know?
I don't, but I think I saw one under 1,000 is what they were advertising.
Yeah, because if I remember right, they were under 800 in that $800 range, but maybe I was seeing something wrong. But there are another
$800 for their APR hunter that has, it looks like an integral rail. It does not have an integral lug.
It's pretty dang good price, though.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and we actually just put one of those in a Christensen Arms chassis, but we had hella issues with their lug size and some of the stuff when they designed it. It just wouldn't fit in the chassis we were trying to put it in, so it was kind of a pain in the butt. So on our actions, the Origin and the Tenacity, I think, kind of take the tie for the top two. Both have their differences that kind of set them apart, but those would be our biggest choice there. Now let's move into another part of it, and depending on what action you get kind of depends on the barrel you can choose, whether you want to go with a pre-fit or whether you're going to have a gunsmith chambered up and throw it on there for you. It just kind of depends. We've got a lot of the impacts recently, and we've just done a couple different barrels and spin them on, spin them off, so we can swap out calibers. But now the top one that we've got on here, I don't have a whole lot of background with, which is Criterion. Which one of you guys have ever messed with Criterion?
Well, let me tell you how many times my ass has been kicked by a $300 Criterion barrel, because it's a lot. They're, and I'm telling you, a lot. So the two guys I mainly shoot with, that's pretty much everything they shoot. They run Criterion prefits on their Savage actions. So it's a Savage style prefit. You're gonna have to buy headspace gauges and a barrel nut, but they're like $350 delivered, and they are just insanely accurate. They just shoot. They've got a pretty good selection. It's not quite as easy as running a pre-fit headspace barrel, like a shouldered barrel, excuse me. But if you're willing to buy $30 or $40 in gauges in a barrel, a barrel nut, they're awful tough to beat. And you can do that same style with McGowan as well, and Schillen all kind of offer those Remage or Savage style prefits.
Yeah, and you just thread the nut on, set your headspace, thread the nut up, kind of like that. And I've heard some things about the McGowans, and I had one, and it didn't shoot worth a crap, the one that I had, but you can't base all your opinions on one barrel. It could have been a reamer, it could have been in a number of things, but I've heard a lot of people that have had a lot of great experiences with McGowan. So it's one of those things, you might be hit and miss. This is the thing, if you're going to buy one of these cheaper barrel manufacturers, they all might be really good. I don't know. But when you buy the proofs, you buy the Bartlands, you buy the benchmarks, you're going to get you're paying for what you get. At least I hope that you would.
My McGowan on my 223 is just I bought a used barreled action, and it shoots half MOA consistently. I might get lucky and get a little less, but like consistently it will shoot half MOA. But like you said, I mean, I think what you do pay for in price sometimes a little bit more of edging your bets on if you're going to get a lemon or not. So I mean, I think that's a valid point too.
Yeah. PVA, I know Patriot Valley does a lot of prefits. They do a lot of work like that. What are your guys' thoughts on the PVAs?
So I actually have one right now. In my mind, and I mean, I could be wrong, but they were the ones that started selling pre-fit barrels, right? I'm sure
Shouldered
other people
prefits,
did
yeah.
it. Yeah, excuse me, shouldered pre-fits. And they started them out with the big horns and they moved to different actions as they felt comfortable with them. And it changed the way consumers bought barrels, right? Now you can buy barrels direct from Proof already set up. Every gunsmith worth their salt that wants to sell volume of barrels has to offer prefits. And that's what they did, right? So they are definitely the pioneer of that. They crank out a ton of barrels. They use Rock Creek blanks, and you can pay a little bit. They're like $550 for a shouldered pre-fit that's already got muzzle threads on it, and
And
that's
I want to
insane.
let me put some perspective there too for some of the guys who maybe haven't actually ever bought a custom barrel before. Um, there's a lot of manufacturers. So, for instance, the BR barrel I have is from Studable Precision, and I think it was about 720, and it shoots insanely good. Probably one of my favorite barrels. But the fact of the matter is, it was convenient that I didn't have to send in my action. But when you talk about budget, which is the point of this, to put some perspective on that, your gunsmiths are going to be what 350 on the low end, 375 all the way up to 550 for a chamber job, and then your barrels are going to be what an Excalibur is about 295 all the way up to your high end barrels being 360 plus. So to me, a pre-fit to be considered budget has to stay in well under 700, just to put some perspective on that, right? So like you said, when PVA is whatever it was, 550, 520, whatever a PVA was, that's where not only are you getting something you can buy off the shelf and like not have to send your action to a gunsmith, but you're saving significant money as well.
Yeah, and he's
Right.
not the only one, right? Aegis was the start. Straight
Right.
Jacket
Like
Armory,
they do
Police
good ones, yeah.
Precision. A
Yeah.
lot of these guys are now offering prefits for different actions, and that takes us back to the action conversation. In my mind, the Tenacity and the Origin are the two to consider because they can spin up prefits for them. That's a big deal. That saves you a lot of money and time.
Right. And then even proof, I mean, I think everyday price on a proof barrel is 360 maybe, but then you can go to Alta Shooting and get a proof pre-fit for 480. So the chamber job costs you $120. That's big time. That's big time.
Right. And there's something you all need to think, you need to take into, account here is if you do this, you're going to need some sort of a way to head space them. You're going to need some sort of a way to, a barrel vise of some sort, and then you're going to need a torque wrench. So if you're going to go that route, plan on spending a little bit of money on the correct tools to do the work yourself. They're going to say, "Oh, this is a lot cheaper," but in the beginning, it might be a little bit more expensive to go this route, trying to buy everything that you're going to need. Then once you've got everything, you go down that road, and it might be a heck of a lot cheaper. Just because, like they said, you can spin stuff on. If you get sick of a cartridge, you can hurry and spin it off, throw something else on if you don't want to build another rifle, which, rifles aren't cheap. So it's definitely a good way to do it. Now, for you hunters, this might be like the Origins might be a good choice. If you want to shoot a 28 nozzle during elk season and you want to go to a 6.5 Creedmoor for deer season or something else, I mean, that could be a very viable option for you guys trying to swap stuff out. So that's just stuff to think about as you're going through these builds of how easy is it going to be? What are the extras I have to buy and everything else? So that's all stuff you've got to take into account, but a lot of people don't tell you. Next is, we talked about the carbon barrels are in that 940 range. The last episode we had Bartlett on, they just told us about the carbon barrels that they released that are going to be cheaper. And then the proof stainless barrels. Proof stainless barrels are one of my favorite barrels. Everyone that I've ever had have shot phenomenally, but they're a little bit more expensive for what you get. And then the preferred fluted barrels, they're here out of Utah. We use a lot of preferred at boring rifles. It just kind of depends on what you want. They shoot great for what they are. They're inexpensive, and you can get a fluted barrel for a lot less that pretty much weighs the same as a carbon barrel. So you can have your money savings there where you can, take a little bit of that money, invest in glass or something else that you might need it in. If we kind of hit barrels there, guys, is there anything else you guys want to bring up in the barrel discussion?
No, I mean, like the proof carbon too. I mean, I think they have a couple of prefits that actually end up being cheaper as prefits than their links are. I want to say their origin prefit is like under $900 chambered, like 850 or something. And then even preferred. I mean, so it's a preferred in the background here, and I've got another one arriving this week that fluted and cerakoted was like 620 out the door, chambered, fluted, and cerakoted. And I think that was $100 cerakote job. So I mean, when you think about the fluting job and the chambering job to slap onto a hunting rifle, that's pretty legit.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the thing is, when people buy their guns, and depending on what you're going to use it for, whether it's hunting or something else, you're probably going to want to find somebody cerakoted as well, just because you don't want this shiny lightning rod sticking out there. But it all depends on what you want to do there as well. Next is optics. Optics is a big one. I mean, we could go the rounds here for 5 hours on what you would choose for a good solid optic on a budget build. But these guys kind of put these together. The Burris XTR2, now I know that's Jose's little cash cow right there. So let's have you explain the XTR2 to us.
No, the XTR3. The XTR2 is a tank. It's heavy. And it's a good one. It's a better budget. But I mean, when you say the XTR3 is a budget hunting rifle, you're kind of talking all relative, right? Because you saw a lot of hunting rifles going towards that 3-18 Mark V or the 3-18 Collis that they came out with. So the one that I actually have here is the XTR3 3-18. It comes in right at 30 ounces with the SCR reticle. It's super short. As you can see, it's kind of compact, so it saves weight and also just isn't obnoxious sitting on your gun. And I love it. But I mean, I think there's a lot of the 3-18 options out there that save you some money over kind of your PRS level 5-25s and whatnot. But the XTR3 is just what I've went with for now. The glass is phenomenal, and it comes in around that. I think street price is around $1,500. And for the glass, I mean, I think it kicks butt for that price range.
Right. And this is the thing is I guess we've got to kind of instill what budget is in a scope. Is it that cheap scope that isn't going to track? You've bought it, the turrets feel crappy, it's just not going to track correctly. Vortex has, some lower end line scopes, with their Diamondback Tactical, some of those that a lot of people use. I've got them on a couple guns, and for a coyote gun or something like that, I mean, they're great. When you get into a hunting gun where, it may be a once in a lifetime hunt or something, you might want to spend a little bit more money on what you're planning on doing, but that's just, personal preference. So Justin, did you put the Citron S3? Is that your choice?
Yeah, so I put a couple of those on there. In my mind, budget optics, which would make a lot of people cringe, but in my mind, it's $1,000 and under. If you're looking to build a custom rifle, you might as well spend, up to $1,000. Well, I would plan on $1,000, honestly. In the S3 from Citron, it's a little behind the times in the technology. It's got 15-minute turrets. It doesn't have a zero stop, but they track every time. The optics in them are well above their price range, and that's what I started shooting with, and I still love them. They're great scopes. And then that XTR2, in my mind, a little bit further behind on the glass, but you pick up those other features. You get high-speed turrets. You also end up getting a zero stop, first focal plane, good first focal plane reticles, and the glass is fine. It's not as good as the Citron, but it's definitely serviceable. I hunted with one for a year and it was totally fine. The other nice thing about the Citron is they've got oodles of elevation. Their 6 to 24 has like 120 minutes in it, which really helps you get out there a long ways.
Yeah.
So
And
I'm a big fan of those.
that XTR2 actually, yeah. I mean, I don't know why. I guess when we was talking earlier, I was thinking hunting, but yeah, when you talk about that sub 1,000, I mean, for me, the only Citrons I've ever actually messed with was shooting with Justin, but for a sub $1,200 scope, and I kind of put that number there on purpose, but sub $1,200, it's to me, I don't think you can beat an XTR2. And luckily, the XTR3 came out and drove that street price down even more. You can get a 4 to 20 used for like under $600, and they're built like a tank, lifetime warranty. The glass is way too good for a $600 price range, and they're just freaking simple and run. So I mean, yeah, and actually they have a ton of. I think they're up there around the 115, 120 MOA elevation internally too.
Yep.
The Sig Tango 4, who put that one on there?
I actually put that one on there. That new Tango 4. So I've run a Tango 6 for a long time. It's a great optic. The only thing that sucks about them is their resale value. They just don't hold their value very well. But conversely, if you're buying on a budget, you can pick one up used for pretty good. And that new Tango 4 looked pretty sweet. I think they're retailing under $1,000 as well. They put the better turrets on them, similar to what the Tango 6 had. It's one I would consider.
Yeah, that's a good idea. The Vortex PST2, that's a great optic. We also need to put in there the new Strike Eagles. They're in that a little bit cheaper class, and I think they've got a 3 to 18 model in that, and it's sub $1,000 as well, if I remember correctly. I might be wrong. But Vortex has a couple of the options in there, and I know a lot of people are like, well, you might not get the best. I don't know. We could go into that. I'm not going to go there tonight, but depending on what you get, everybody's like, why do you need a lifetime warranty? All that crap. But for the money, they're great optics. I've got a few of them and I don't have any problems. This one right back here is a PST2. They're great scopes. The only issue that I would have with them hunting is, the not cap turrets, and that's something that you've got to look at. If you're going to be primarily hunting, there's a lot of these scopes that don't necessarily cross over the greatest. If they've got cap turrets, you don't necessarily want to shoot something that doesn't have a great turret design in PRS. But, if you've got uncapped turrets, they can go both ways. You just got to worry about putting it in your pack or running it, twisting the dials or things like that. So that's something you want to think about when you're purchasing scopes. And we all see it all the freaking time of, oh, you need to buy this scope. You need to buy this scope. And I tell you all, like I say every time, go to Cabela's, go to one of those places, look through them before you buy them, and walk outside with them and check them out. Take the time to make sure that it's good for your eye, because heck, one of those cheaper scopes might be perfect for what you're looking for, and you don't, maybe you don't die a lot. You just, hold. So you got to look for, those options in it. But that's just something you got to think about. Go ahead.
Yeah, and Justin and I have had this discussion a couple times lately, but I love seeing when something comes into trend. The NRL 22, I think, has actually created what I'm about to say. If I if I had to say my say so, I think that's where it came from. I mean, this is a Voodoo 22 sitting here in the Macmillan, but now's the better time than any ever before, I think, to get budget scopes that really pack a lot of punch. So, for instance, you mentioned that Strike Eagle. I think those are actually down. I think even the 5 to 25 or 6 to 24, whatever it is actually down under $700. And then Burris came out with the RT25 and RT15, and then Bushnell. I think I see where a lot of NRL 22 people run it. Is it the Nitro line? I think they call it, and that's like under $500. And they all parallax down to at least 15 yards. They all are up above 20 on the high end. They may not have the most internal elevation, but plenty for 22. Or frankly, honestly, most guys that are getting a budget build are only going to shoot to 1,000 yards. Well, crap, you need like 7 mils with a 308 to get to 1,000 yards. You don't need that much internal elevation. And from what I've seen, the Strike Eagle and even the RT, I've got 2 of the RTs. glass is better. It seems to me that they actually kind of stretched and put better glass in that Strike Eagle or the RT line than they did in the XTR2 or PSTs, which is really ridiculous because they come in a few $100 cheaper than the PST or the XTR2. So, I mean, the need for innovation and technology has been pretty damn cool to watch come out lately because there's a lot of even now, or even all the way down to like Vortex going down the Diamondback, was it Diamondback Tactical HP or whatever HD. There's a lot of actually good options. I mean, we can sit here and be scope snobs because we have paid $2,500 for scopes or more before. But the fact of the matter, there's a heck of a lot of sub even $700 options today. You know.
I think that Strike Eagle is going to be a market changer. That's a pretty sweet scope for the price.
Yep.
Yeah, the lifetime warranty and everything else. I mean, it's one of those that you can invest in and not feel bad about investing in it because you know you're at least gonna. If something happens to it, it's not going to break, and that's one of the big worry things. But yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Bushnells. The Bushnells have, kind of been one of those hidden gems, I think, to where I see it in a lot of groups to where they come out with group buys. I always see George from GA Precision doing group buys, and I think the last one they did, you could buy a scope and a Kestrel and a whole bunch of stuff, and it was like under $800 or something. And they have those kind of things all the time to where you can do that. And I mean, that's just one of those things you need to keep your eye out. But they've got some great options. The 6 Hour Whiskey 5. Is that you, Justin?
That was actually
That'd be
me. I put that
Jose.
on there.
Okay.
For a long time, that was actually my only complaint about it was a lack of FFB or first focal plane. But holy crap, it's such a right. I mean, I'm a big PRS shooter, but if I wasn't or I say that I'm a competition shooter. But if you're just a guy that loves to plink and also loves to hunt, I've put a lot of buddies on that 6 hour whiskey 5. I mean, I think it comes in just over $1,000 street price, and the glass is phenomenal. The windage turret is capped, and then the locking mechanism on the elevation turret, you actually push a button to release it, so it's no up and down. I'm sorry, I know a lot of Vortex guys here, but I hate the up and down zero stop. And this one, or zero turret lock, and this one's actually just a button that your thumb kind of falls on as it spins. It's got a built-in level, like anti-cant level, where some lights light up on the inside as you're looking through the scope to let you know whether you're level or not. There's just a lot of bang for the buck, and they're light. They're low profile. The turrets are super low profile. If you just like to plink, I mean, I've shot it to a mile, and for a hunting gun, I mean, Courtney won't let me take it off of her hunting gun. She's laid claim to it for the last 3 years. So the Whiskey 5 is a huge deal, especially if you're not going to explicitly compete. It's a heck of a value.
It's good to know. Yeah, and I think the only SIG I've got is the system, the BDX system, and I'm still trying to decide if it's one of those that I really really like or if it's something. But maybe I'll have one of the guys from SIG come and kind of tell us about those because that's something that I need to learn more about. Is definitely the SIG line. Next up, triggers. Now there are a few other triggers manufacturers out there, but these are the two budget friendly ones. Now, whoever put it on there did Timney 510. The Timney 510 doesn't exist anymore. It's the Timney Elite Hunter. So if you go to Timney and you look for the trigger, it's called the Elite Hunter. It used to be the 510. And then the Trigger Tech, the primary. Those are probably the best two options for the lower end, depending on what you want to do, whether you want the Timney or the Trigger Tech. They're both great triggers. I've got one of each. And, I mean, they've both got their great things about them. The Trigger Tech has the external adjustments for pull, where the Timney doesn't. But I mean, that's the thing though, is once you set it for what you like, how much are you actually going to mess with it, right?
Right.
What are some other options that you guys can think of off the top of your head that maybe somebody can look into, depending on what?
Those are the two I would recommend. You can also get a Schillen.
That's what I was going to say
I have a
too.
Schillen that is phenomenal. Like it breaks just crisp as can be, but they're kind of annoying. At least when I bought them, they didn't come with safeties, and you had to have an old style Remington trigger to pull the safety off of to make it work. And that's just a pain because I don't think like the new X Mark Pro trigger would work to swap the safeties off. So that was my only reason I didn't put a shilling on there. But the Timney and the Trigger Tech just work. I really don't see any reason to go anything
Yeah.
besides those two for a budget trigger.
I have a
Right.
shilling also that just came with a gun, and it almost makes me mad because I looked it up and it was like $80, and it feels because it's 8 ounces, but it's also not adjustable. So like on my prairie dog shooting 223, like it's absolutely fine, and I freaking love it. But it's not adjustable, and yeah, when I take the gun apart, I look at it, I'm like, ugh. But I mean, if you want to go cheap, but holy crap! I mean, what the primary can be had for like $120 on sale. I don't even know what the Elite Hunter is. I'm guessing probably around there, maybe even hair less. And so, I mean, it's a lot of good options for a lot of value.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the nice things is you don't have to go very far looking for a good trigger. And it also depends on, what you're going. And we're just talking about 700 platforms. Now, if you're going to go into the Tikas or you're going into the Rugers or something like that, Trigger Tech does not support those. You'd have to go through the Timney line. They've got, when I worked with Timney, I couldn't believe how many triggers they had. They had triggers for all sorts of stuff. So, that might, if you've got a Ruger or something, that might kind of narrow that down for you. But so I guess we probably should have prefaced this at the beginning was we were going to talk about 700 type platforms. We can get into the Ruger platforms, we can get into all that, but this is kind of what we were going to talk about just because it's got probably the most diverse choice lineup that you can get. Now for a bipod, Harris, absolutely nothing else for a budget bipod. This was something that one of my buddy's kids actually came to me with last night. He said, "Hey, Cole, I went online and I found this bipod for $40. Don't buy it. Don't waste your money because you're not going to like it. It's going to be flimsy. You're going to try and load it. It's going to break. It's going to fall apart. I believe in my mind the bipod is probably one of those things you don't want to, buy one of the cheap Caldwell. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
I see some guys I respect the heck out of run mag pulls on some of their secondary rifles. Those are like $100.
Yeah, and I mean that might be a good choice, but the Harrises are in that price range too, depending on which one you get.
Right.
I'm talking about like the Caldwell ones that you got to twist, and you pull apart, and you can actually pull them completely out. I mean, me personally, I wouldn't spend the money there. I'd spend a little bit more money on the bipod, but that's just me. So, what are those the only two that you can think of in that price range? Is the Magpul and the Harris? And the Magpul can't get as high as the Harris, though, right?
I've honestly never shot them. I know multiple times I've noticed guys that I think are really good shooters that buy really good stuff, and I see them running a Magpul, and it like catches me off guard. So it can't be that bad.
Well, and that's the thing is if you've got multiple guns, and you buy a good bipod, you can swap it between all of them. It's one of those things that if you buy it, you're not just most people. When I start shooting, I swap my Harrises around a lot. I don't really use a Harris a lot anymore unless it's a hunting rifle, but they're great bipods for what they are. Now, there's a couple things that we could hit, and those are full rifle builds for on a budget. Now, there's quite a few of them out there now that are just freaking phenomenal rifle builds, but I almost want to save that for another episode to where we can go in, break down the rifles, what goes into them. There's a couple of rifles that if we break them completely down and tell you what goes into them, there's no way in hell that you could build that rifle for what they're selling it for. And that's one of those things that we want to hit in, and maybe we'll hit it in next week or the week after. But that's one that we really want to go over because there's a lot of good options out there, and maybe you don't know of all of them right now. And we could get into that. But, the Tika T3s, the RPRs, the Savages, there's so many different options out there now that you could go in that. And I think that's one of the reasons why Remington's kind of struggling is they're not keeping up with how everything's evolving, and they're staying with what they are, and they're not evolving your actions and everything else. And, we can go into that. But is there anything else that either one of you want to hit on before we go?
So the only thing I would say, it's overwhelming for someone when they want to build a custom rifle especially if they want it actually custom, right? Not tricking out an existing rifle. If they want to start from the ground up, you're looking at what? Even on a budget, we're pushing 2,500
$2,000.
bucks probably.
Yeah.
But and is that before a scope? Like that's just the
Oh,
rifle?
that is literally just action, trigger, barrel, muzzle brake
Correct.
stock.
Yeah. So
That's
you're
not
looking
rings. That's not
25.
bipod. Yeah.
Yeah. So 2,500 bucks. I mean, that's what most guys are buying: binoculars, a spotting scope, a rifle, and a rifle scope for that price. So they just can't even imagine spending that much for a rifle. But the thing I liked about it is you could literally go a piece at a time. You know, you can buy an action and let it sit there for a year till you got enough money to buy a stock. And then, especially if you're willing to buy used and just wait for a good deal, you can take 2 or 3 years to put it together and you can have your dream build and it doesn't hurt near as bad as writing that big check the first time.
Right. Yeah, and coming back, if you bought the Origin, if you bought some of those, you could buy one and use it for different options. If you wanted to have a PRS rifle one weekend and go hunt with it the next, you're getting used to your trigger, you're getting used to your bolt throw, you're getting used to all that type of stuff. So that makes it a lot easier. Dave asked before we go, he goes, just guys, there's an answer. What's a typical in a budget build, stock or chassis, and what are the major differences? I think in my mind, the stock is probably still the most popular in a budget build just because the chassis are a little bit more money. What do you guys think?
I actually would have said chassis because then you leave out the $200 of the bottom metal. And honestly, I think the other thing, right? Because when you talk about a budget build, if you're going to buy something used off Sniper side, then yeah, there's going to be stocks ready and there's going to be chassis ready and everything in between. But if you're talking about you're just going to go buy something you're going to go order from GA Precision and PVA and blah, blah, blah. Like, you got to wait on a stock. That chassis is always there. And when you've got the options like the Bravo, like the Element, or the KRG X-Ray or something like that you can just order and have in 6 days or whatever it is, I would actually have said chassis, but it's also kind of what's one that's hard to define, I guess.
See, and I would have said just the KRG, which some people consider a stock and other people consider it a chassis. But I honestly don't think anything touches it for the price for what it offers. To me, it is the budget chassis / stock.
Yeah.
Plus, if we're answering what you see, I see way too many people. I just gave props to their bipod, but that Magpul Hunter stock, I guess that new stock they come out or chassis they came out with is supposed to be awesome. But that Magpul Hunter, it hurts me to see people run. It's flimsy. The ergonomics are not great. The spacer's not great. The cheek system is awful. And it's crazy because Magpul makes awesome stuff, but that stock I think just could be redesigned from the ground up, and for the same money as the KRG Bravo.
Right. And I saw the KRG today in a picture that had the full front end on it, so that you could run, NV, or you could do all that. So eventually, if you upgraded, that's one you could take with you. If you wanted your kids to shoot it, you can take the spacers out, you can adjust the cheek. It's got the, all the options that I think you'd want. It comes in a couple colors. They do make them for 10/22. The only thing I'd like to see them do is a long action. I think right now the only one they do it in is a short action, which is great because I shoot my 300 short mag in it a lot. But I would like to see them do a long action to where guys could, do something. But for a hunting stock, they're phenomenal. For a PRS competition stock, they're a great entry level stock. I mean, you're going to want to eventually probably upgrade to something else. But again, I think going back to it, Dave, to answer your question, I think the KRG is probably the best bang for the buck, and that's what these guys agree with. Hopefully y'all learned something from this today. And if you have questions, always ask us. The Long Range Tactics group itself, we're all in there trying to, answer questions, create, talk, have a good time, share pictures. It's just a good place you can go. You're not going to get freaking beat up if you have questions and stuff like that. There's a lot of those big groups out there that have a crap ton of followers. You ask a question, you get your ass handed to you, and we're not like that. So come join us over at the Long Range Tactics page. Ask questions. This episode was thought up because someone asked us about it, so we did it. if there's an episode that you want to hear, or if there is someone you would like us to talk to, let's do it. One of the big things that I'm going to do as it's hunting season is I'm going to push into a couple hunting things in the next few weeks. Mountain Ops wants to come on, do an episode, kind of talk about how you can get in shape and get ready for hunts, different things like that. And we've got some other cool stuff coming along. So I kind of want to make it a broad spectrum to where a lot of the guys that shoot competition are hunters too, like we all are. So I kind of want to make it to where everybody can have fun and come here and relax. But again, if you have ideas, bring them to us. We're always willing to at least listen to them. Anyway, thanks you guys for coming. I appreciate it. Hope you all have a good evening.
Thanks, Cole.
Yes, sir.
See you, Jose.
See y'all.